Hey guys, this book review, I'm going to discuss a book called Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. Please, I hope I said that right. This book is Gyasi's debut novel and it did not disappoint. A lot of times books will get some hype and everybody gets really excited about them and they don't always live up to that. Well, this one definitely did. This was a 4.5-star read for me and it is historical fiction. This book is set up in a unique way in that it follows the story of two sisters, unbeknownst to each other, who are born in different African villages to the matriarch of this entire story, and her name is Mam. So she has two daughters. One of them is named Efia and one of them is named Essie, and they are born in different villages and neither one of them knows that they exist. What the novel does as far as how it's set up is it follows each generation starting from Efia and Essie in the 1700s all the way to much more modern present times, probably ending around the 1960s, 70s. So what happens is Efia, her life goes in a much more luxurious direction. She marries above the African slave trade to somebody that is in charge of and oversees those things. So her life is completely different. Now her sister Essie, who's in a different village, does end up getting captured and does become part of the African slave trade. And she ends up in America, again, totally different lives, yet from the same origin. So what's really cool about this novel is that Gyasi is able to really seamlessly weave all of these stories together to tell one tale of heritage and history. It's almost like a patchwork quilt where it just is all one element, but just each a different part of a bigger picture. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this novel was the different characters and perspectives. Each chapter, the chapters are kind of long. They're roughly about 20 pages plus or minus a few, but each one could be read on its own, honestly, as a short story. But what is super cool are the fact that you see these Easter eggs throughout each generation. So if you're reading about a third generation from Efia's line, you're gonna see little elements of personality and history and perhaps objects that follow from the origin of history. So you'll see these little things that trickle all the way down through each generational line. So again, I thought just the way that it was structured and set up was so unique and just really awesome the way that it unfolded. Another thing that's great is since this is a historical fiction novel, you get these little glimpses of history throughout each generation and you see what's happening in Ghana in Africa, and then you see what's also happening here in America at the time. And you see through each generation the characters' actions and circumstances and how those have ripple effects and just the path that it leads the characters on until we get to the very end of the novel. So I didn't have a lot of dislikes, but the reason I did give this 4.5 stars is because each chapter, that chunk, that 20-something pages, is almost the only in-depth part of character development that you get. I'm a very character-driven reader, so I found myself wanting more. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing because you'll hear about and you'll see the characters again in the way of those Easter eggs in the later generations. Some of those characters come back to haunt you, or the other characters, if you will. But I had some favorites that I just wanted to hear more about. I particularly really enjoyed Ibina and Akua. Hope I'm saying that right. And I also really liked Willie and Sunny from the other side of the generation. So there were some favorites that I just really enjoyed reading about and I wanted to hear more of their story. So that's why I gave it a 4.5 stars out of 5. So while this does have to do with it starts off in the origin of the African slave trade, this novel really explores a lot of other elements of just life. They talk about, yes, of course, they talk about race, but they also talk about religion. They talk about circumstance. They talk about gender and gender roles and how you see all of these things kind of evolve and change and develop one circumstance throughout history. So as far as your triggers go, I didn't find this to be particularly difficult. Maybe in the beginning, There are some parts that are scattered throughout that, of course, are ugly times in history, or they're just in a part of the country's origin where something terrible is happening at the time, but it's not very graphic at all. I do have a recommendation, because you will, obviously have to put the book down at some point. I would read and stop at each generation. So in the beginning, again, you're going to get Ephia and Essie. I would read that generation so that you can see what's going on during their time frame in both of their villages, and then, take a break if you have to and come back and read them generations at a time. That was another thing that was a little bit difficult for me to follow. Luckily, there is a family tree at the beginning of the novel, so you can go back and see how everybody is related and on what side that they're on. But it can get confusing if you stop and start and you are not, aware of what generation you're on in terms of the story. So that's just a recommendation. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys about Homecoming. I hope that you pick it up. It is just a wonderful piece of literature and a great bunch of stories that all come together to form something awesome. But if you don't, I hope that you are reading something and that you're enjoying it. So we'll see you next time. Bye.